kind of lost myself for a really long time.
How do you create ownership around people acting this way?
I did go into a really dark place. Like I was probably, I wouldn't label it diagnosed depression, but I was in a really dark place.
What's one of the biggest mistakes you've made?
I've actually never been asked that question.
I haven't asked this on the show yet, but I'm curious to see.
If everybody did this, we would live in a perfect world.
This is Elemental Conversations, where leadership isn't just talked about, it's tested. I'm Tyler, your host, helping you lead with your values, push through adversity, roll with change, and make bold decisions. New episodes every Monday. Subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, and if you're ready to challenge the status quo, then get ready to let the alchemy of education ignite your passion for learning.
Fire, earth, wind, water. This is the Elemental Educator, and now your host, Tyler Como.
Who's been your biggest influence?
This question is interesting. I get this asked a lot, and I have many. I would say that in education, it was a principal when I first started teaching who saw things in me that I didn't see in myself at the time. And I grew up always trying to strive for more, but never, I think, truly believed in what I was capable of. And this principal did that for me. And I think that really, at the age I was at then as an adult, accelerated kind of my next steps.
Okay, and what about the other side?
Oh, so I have many as well. I mean, I've got two young kids, and I think that, when you have kids, they're a massive influence on you because I think it makes you think and change and reflect in different ways. I had lots of influencers growing up that, brought me to my elite athlete world. It was my coach. I'm always going to, give credit to my parents because, they provided me with the opportunities and my family.
I haven't asked this on the show yet, but I'm curious to see how much of your journey was luck versus skill.
Luck versus skill. Wow. So I've actually never been asked that question. And it's interesting because when I think about luck, I think about, being in the right place at the right time, saying yes to the right opportunities. And skill, I believe that people are born naturally with some skill, but I think the majority of your skill comes through your mindset and your ability to see things differently. And so I think when I think about luck, I think part of that goes into the mindset that you have, because when you have a mindset that you can do more and be more, you see things in a different way and think doors open up for you. So I think that luck, you can create more opportunities for yourself with luck when you see things differently, if that makes sense.
It's like the old phrase, you have to have skill to be lucky, and you have to have luck to have skill. They kind of go hand in hand. Alchemists, welcome to a new episode. We've got an amazing guest, Michelle Sigmann, with us, who is a principal, certified wellness coach, and a mom of two who understands the challenge of balance in a busy life. She supports both adults and kids in building daily habits with their goals, strengthening mental health, and fuel lasting transformation. A former member of the Canadian National Barefoot water ski team, Michelle knows the power of discipline and performance. She leads workshops for principals, coaches, parents, and athletes, offers one-on-one coaching, and has developed a wellness curriculum tailored for school leaders. Michelle has authored My Personalized School Setting Workbook, published articles through the Ontario Principals Council, and has been featured on multiple podcasts. Her mission is to help others believe in themselves, admit to personal growth, and unlock the next level that they're meant to be at. Michelle, welcome to my show, The Elemental Educator. It is my pleasure to have you on today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Tyler, for having me here.
Alchemists, my one request before we get into our first segment, it would mean everything to me if you head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe at Elemental Educator. Growing the channel enables me to bring on incredible guests like Michelle and continue delivering the best show I can for you. That being said, we're going to get into our first segment.
3, 2, 1.
Rooted in wisdom, driven by purpose, Grounded Moments is all about our values. And there's no better way to see what we truly value, Michelle, than to play a game. Are you ready to play?
Yes, love games.
All right, Michelle, I'm going to give you a scenario and you can reply in one of two ways. It's either a principle, which means it's something that is a part of your everyday life, it's a core value, or a preference, meaning it's okay if not everybody does it. Ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, waking up before 6 a.m.
Preference.
Daily exercise, no matter what.
Ground purpose.
No phones during meals.
That's a ground and purpose. Yeah.
Carry-on luggage only.
That would be a preference.
Coffee before anything.
Oh, yes. That is a grounded purpose.
One day a week needs to be off social media.
That would be a preference.
Making your bed every morning.
I hear that's really good for you, but my hours are different than my husband's. So I'm going to say that that would be a preference, but it's not always possible.
There's no screens in the bedroom.
Yes, absolutely. Grounded purpose.
Dressing sharp while at home.
Oh, yes. Look good, feel good. I always say that. So I try my best, but I will tell you, I have some very comfy clothes that I'm going to call this one a preference. I'm going to call this a preference.
And the opposite of the first one, never working on tasks after 6.
It's tough. In the amount of jobs that I carry, I will say that my balance is very good, but times of the day is not always going to meet that 6 p.m. So I'm going to say it would be a preference.
And there's our first segment game, Michelle. The goal of it is to establish what we truly value. We have to stand by them. And I want to ask before we fully get into this segment here, what's the most important thing that the audience needs to know about you in order to understand your story for the rest of the show?
So I think the most important thing I want people to know about me is that I haven't had anything come easy to me in life, and that I really, truly believe, and I ground this work for my kids in kindness and hard work gets you everywhere in life. And who I am is exactly who I am in all parts of my life. So I'm honest, I'm authentic, I'm a hard worker, and I believe that I can do more than what I can, but nothing's come easy. So when I tell my story, people see me on Instagram and they think, oh, how do you do all of those things? And I said, everything takes time. And that's where a lot of my work is done through, with habits and consistency, to prove that I wasn't where I am right now, 15, 20 years ago. I wasn't where I am now a year ago. And that consistency in habits is truly works, and it is a huge part of my story.
What's one of the topics that you have established that's now become a non-negotiable for you?
My morning routine. I've spoke about this on other places, but I have a story that from an athlete into where I am now, kind of lost myself for a really long time. And I really grounded myself in my morning routine. That's kind of where I started. And with a busy schedule and busy kids, it's kind of my happy place before I have to give to everybody else. And so I give myself that time to journal and meditate or read or whatever it is that I need to do in that morning. Enjoy the cup of coffee, that grounded purpose, and then my workout. And I find after that, I feel like I've given enough to myself. And at that time, and I can then continue as a leader in a school, and then also being a mom and a wife and giving back to my family.
How long is your morning routine?
So this is also, I would not recommend right off the bat. I will tell you, it started as, a 20-minute thing. It's now a good hour and a half. So I am up between 4:30 and 4:45. Again, you have to understand too, I'm a principal during the day, but I also have a wellness business. So I sometimes that early morning is getting some work done, much needed work that I didn't have time for in the evening before, and then dedicating at least 30 to 45 minutes for my workout.
Awesome. And with all the neural wellness that you've put onto students, teachers, principals, you've been a part of the hiring talks before. What are the top 3 things you look for in a team member?
Yeah. So I struggle when it comes to interviews because I've always said I'd rather, someone follow me around for a couple months and get to know me, or me do the same to somebody else, because I think it's very hard to see who someone truly is through questions. However, in saying that, I you can get some questions that really pull out authenticity. So what I want to see is authenticity and honesty. Um, I want to see passion for kids. And with that passion comes, you hear it in the stories that they tell. You hear it in, you know, the way they present themselves when they talk about kids and families. Like, they just glow. And yeah, I want to bring a new strength to my team. So I'm always looking for something that our school doesn't have. Curriculum, you can teach anyone to teach curriculum, but you can't teach people to be intuitive to kids and to know kids and to engage students and families in different ways. That comes with a character trait of a person. So
And I sit back down and think about the same thing right there. I'm with you, Team Michelle. I love to hear stories. I love their passion. I love to hear that somebody can show how dedicated they are to the community because they love it. I completely agree that it's a really hard thing to actually discover in an interview process. I've become a fan of reference checking, the top 5 people that we wanted to interview. And, the conversations, sometimes it's informed the interview and made it a little bit better to have that reference check done. There's been instances where you catch somebody saying something and
mhm.
it's the opposite of what their reference have said. And you don't need that awkward conversation, but the conversation is you're putting your team first. You're putting your team forward, and that's what matters the most, especially in that leadership position. You're surrounding yourself with a team that wants to work towards that common goal and not somebody
Yeah.
that's just looking for a job. Michelle, before you came on the show, I asked you to just give me a quote that you wanted to bring on the show. And the one you brought was, "We may not always have the power of control which shows up at our door,
Mhm.
but we always have the power to decide what stays and what goes." And what I would love to know is, where did you discover this quote and why did you choose to bring it on the show today?
So, there's two books that I've read of Cleo Wade's, and she has some great insight. And I'm such a quote person because when I see a quote or read a quote or hear a quote, I often just take a minute to reflect on what that means to me. And this quote is near and dear to my heart, um, because it really speaks about the mind. And in the world that we live in, it's so easy to get wrapped up in things that we can't control. And it's so easy to complain and make excuses about things we can't control. But we have so much power in our mind, and we have so much power in what we decide to read, the people we decide to surround ourselves with, the messages that we choose to believe about ourselves and others, the perception we see. And so when this quote says you get to decide what stays and what goes, we actually do. We have a filter system in our reticular activating system in our mind, right? We get to say, this is great. I'm going to let this come in, and then I'm getting rid of it because it's not serving me, or it's not serving, my family or the people that I lead. And so often as a principal, I have to do that. I have to filter things through for my staff and for my families and my kids. And I truly have the message of, we can only control this piece. So let's focus here. Let's focus on the control. And those other things that come in, they're just waves that are passing. And some of them we're going to learn from and use, and others we're just going to let them keep going. And when you do that, when you take that control back over and say, I get to decide what stays and what goes, you do, have different perspective. You see things differently, and you also create more positive opportunities for yourself. And that's what I live by this quote. I really do. And so kudos out to Cleo Wade for that.
Yeah, the picture of how we can control things, and it can be really difficult, especially when negative information, even positive information, we can't control what shows up as information. Walk me through how you take that and you actually have the ability to say, that's not something I'm willing to go through with.
So, I mean, we as people have to make many decisions throughout the day, and as a principal and a leader, we make even more, and as a mom, you make even more. So I had to work really hard on this, and like I said, I won't go into my deepest story before, but that's a big part I had to learn, because what I was holding on to before were things that I couldn't control, and I was, taking those on and making it a part of my narrative, which was actually taking me in a more negative path. And so that was one of the first things I did, and through doing that was, they call them affirmations, I call them power statements. Um, I always joke that a power statement is a statement you give to yourself, but they say the powerhouse is your mitochondria. So I do get that. I'm not saying science can't be involved in this, but the power statement is you're telling yourself something you want to believe. And when we go through our day-to-day things, and statements are said that may that we can't control, that maybe have a negative impact, or a situation happens, or the weather changes, or we didn't go the route we wanted to go, we have to get used to interrupting our thoughts. And it takes time and consistency. And I would say if everybody did this, we would live in a perfect world. So it takes time. It takes a habit of saying those statements to yourself when a situation happens, or a statement is said, or whatever happens that may be not something that's going to serve you. Being able to stop, interrupt your thought, and then change your thought pattern. And you do that through power statements. You can do that through practicing giving yourself times throughout the day where you're just sitting in your thoughts. And I mean, it's not realistic to say you're going to give yourself 10 minutes, but I'm talking about, a minute or two, 3 to 4 times a day, to just sit in your thoughts. Another thing is using timers on your cell phone. We carry our cell phones around like they're, our purse, like they're just everywhere with us. Having those timers that remind you of those power statements and remind you about the thought process, and keeping in control of what you can control and letting out things you can't control. So those are just some quick things. There's lots that I do around teaching about that. It is definitely step one when it comes to you trying to achieve a goal. You have to start with your mind. You have to start with your thought process, because our mind is the most powerful thing that we have.
What's an example of a power thought that you use?
So if we use the control one, it could be, I am in control of my day. I choose positivity, and I will conquer whatever comes at me today. That is an example of one power statement.
I was listening to someone a few years ago, and they said the best thing you can do when you wake up in the morning is say something to yourself every day. And it was so simple for them to get out of bed, take a minute before they needed to go, and say, it's going to be a great day. And I didn't adopt that fully, but at some point in my morning routine, I tell myself it's going to be a great day. The purpose for that, we had a student that, one particular student where every time they walked into the building, they said, it's going to be a great day. And I actually think it's the best thing that somebody could do, because it brightens up their faces, and it brightens up the faces of those around them when we hear it. And it brightens my face. And I've adopted saying it as well, because the power of even just starting with a simple phrase puts you into that mindset to start your day the best way possible. So I appreciate you sharing that. That being said, what's a hill that you're willing to die on, Michelle?
Oh gosh, you know what? This is such a great question, Tyler, because I die on a lot of hills, I'm going to tell you, but the one that I will stand true to all the time is communication. The way you communicate with each other and yourself matters the most. And when I, first got my first school as a principal, I said, I'm going to have a word of the year. And every year for the last 3.5 years, I've had a word of the year. And the first year that I was at my new school, it was communication. And I would hold everybody accountable for both the way they communicate with others and themselves. And I would do it in a way that allows for growth and opportunity. And you can give as much feedback as you want. You can disagree with someone. You can have a debate. But when you do it with kindness in your communication, you can grow so much more from both sides. But when you enter a conversation with judgment and assumptions and negative perceptions, the other person that you're on the other side with, they shut down. They're not hearing you. So it is the hill I'll die on, is the communication. And I will call every student on it, every teacher on it, every parent on it. I will call myself on it, friends and family. When we can communicate more effectively with ourselves and each other, the growth is immense. It's huge.
What's your word this year?
So it's funny because, yeah, I've actually started thinking about my next year. So the first year was communication. The second year was accountability. And then this past year was connection. And every year we build on those words. And so we don't throw away communication to adopt accountability. We then bring on accountability with the intent of continuing communication, and they go hand in hand. And then the same to connection. So I've been playing around with this year's word, but I'm leaning on intentionality because I've got some things up my sleeve around that.
How do you create ownership around people acting this way?
Again, I'm going to go back to consistency and habits. So as a leader, and I'm not just speaking myself as a leader, I'm speaking to, the leaders in my building as well. When you can model it and show up that way every day, the most that you can, it's going to create sustainability because people are going to start to adapt, right? And people are going to start to invest in what that word means. And investment needs to be individualized. I can't force somebody to invest in something that I'm invested in. They need to believe it for themselves and also see themselves within that investment. And so when it comes to, the very first year with communication, it was bringing it into every staff meeting. It was bringing it into my parent community meetings. It was bringing it into assemblies, bringing it into the messaging that went out in our weekly newsletters. It was the conversations in the hallways. It was when I heard of a conflict that happened between, two students, I'm bringing that forward. When I hear about something that was done in the community that was, said or done about our school, I brought it back. And it was just that consistency that builds sustainability. And that's when you build the investment, and it's never going to be perfect. That would be great if everyone, 100% of your whole school. I've got a big school. I've got about 700 students and, 50 staff members. But when you have, 95% for the most part on board, it's pretty powerful.
Michelle, have you heard of an elevator pitch before?
Oh my gosh, I have, but now I can't think of what the context there is. You might have to.
So the duration of an elevator ride, you have 15, 20 seconds to share your idea with whoever's riding the elevator with you. And right now I'm riding it. And so are the people listening here. And I want to come back to our hill to die on, communication. And so I want your best pitch, 15 to 20 seconds here, on why communication should be the number one priority that a leader focuses on.
So communication is the most important skill as a leader. And the reason for that is when you can communicate effectively with each other, so others, and then they can see you communicating effectively with yourself, it builds investment. It builds investment in the messages that's coming out of your voice. It's building investment into the feedback that you're giving back and forth, and is what allows others to grow. And when you can grow and you have investment because you're communicating effectively, you can make change in your buildings, in your students. And like I said, power happens.
And it always comes back to communication. Communication is what gets you in the door. It shows you how to overcome adversity with people, or how you can implement change, how you can make decisions. If you're not communicating, you're not functioning. And that's actually going to be a really good segue into our next segment, where we talk about adversity. In In Headwinds and Tailwinds, we get down to the mistakes we've made and what's in the aftermath to learn. To get into the comfort zone, Michelle, of mistakes, we're going to play another game. And this is a different game. It's brand new on the show today. One that we're going to try out here. This is adversity. And have you done a Mad Lib before?
Oh, no, I don't think I ever
It's
have.
usually like, hey, we read through the blanks and it's like, okay, fill this in now with a verb or an adjective. We're going to go through that full process, but I'm going to ask you to fill in some blanks for me. And they can be the honest truth, or you can totally make them up. You ready to give it a try?
Oh, yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. I once had to blank. Well, blank.
I once had to, gosh, I'm not good on the spot like this. I once had to wear running shoes when I was barefoot water skiing.
There's a story behind that, and I can't wait to get into that moment. I realized I had to grow when blank happened.
The moment I realized I had to grow was when I woke up one morning and looked in the mirror and I didn't see myself anymore.
I failed at blank, learned blank, and now I blank.
Oh gosh, can I remember all that? I failed. I'm not a good test writer, so I failed my personal trainer exam. And then I learned that I had the ability to teach it in a different way. And now, 20 years later, I'm a wellness coach.
Okay, last one here. My most ridiculous leadership moment involved blank.
Okay, my most ridiculous leadership moment was creating a TikTok dance for my students and performing it in front of all the parents and students. But it was the best. I loved it. But it was ridiculous.
That was great. You did such a good job with the game, and first time playing the game on the show. I like it better than the game I think I was playing before, but I want to take a minute and just say, hey, listeners, alchemists, we played Make It Worse before, and this is an adversity Mad Lib. Let me know, send an email, drop a comment, DM me, Tyler at elementaleducator.com or on Instagram at elementaleducator. Which one did you prefer on the show? We play them to create comfort, but we also play them to bring joy to the listeners. And so which one did you enjoy the most? And Michelle, with unpacking some of this adversity here, what is something that you realized you had to unlearn?
Oh, we do a lot of unlearning every day in the work that we do as educators. I've learned a lot around diversity and getting to know people and their stories for who they are. And so around communication, but also accountability and connection, I've really had to unlearn the way that I hear angry parents or angry teachers or angry students. And, the person that I am, and I am so passionate about what I do. And so I, used to take things very personal, always kind of looked at things as an attack. Something I had to unlearn was that I had to just be an attentive listener and hear people and see people for who they are and not in a way of what I think their agenda is or what I think their perception is that I just need to listen to the words. And when I started to do that, it really changed who I was as a leader because it allowed me, number one, to listen attentively with the opportunity to learn and grow. But then also it built a stronger connection with the person on the other side of the table. And I really realized that unlearning the way you hear things and allowing you to open up your mind and listen more attentively, that can be a massive change, especially in, such a diverse world that we live in. So I think, I've unlearned so much and I could probably, if I had to just make, a long list, but that one I think would be the most recent one over the last couple of years that has really changed myself as a leader and as a person, because anything we do in our leadership transfers into, our outside world too with our families and the other parts of our life.
You know, I used to think that when people or parents or teachers or caregivers approached me with news to share or were upset about something, that they were angry or they just wanted to get it off their chest. And sometimes it would be. What I learned is they often come to you because they're scared or they care. And acknowledging that can fully change that environment. And so I start every conversation with every parent, whether it's a good conversation or I know it's going to be a tough conversation. We just go on, even in the future, if it's going to be a difficult one, we're having this conversation, but I see how much you care and what you're doing. And I want to work with you to make sure that the caring leaves you feeling safe, leaves you feeling confident. And when you start that way, you totally shift the mindset of the conversation from an angry one to a collaborative one. And I've had more progress and learned more about people by letting them know and putting my wall down and not being defensive on my end. So I just say, I'm here to learn your story, to do the best I can.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to make this a win for you? Instantly practicing that and projecting everything that I thought I stood for, because, I thought if somebody came in angry at some point, we didn't have that honest conversation with them and they were still angry. I'm curious, Michelle, if you're willing to get into this, what's one of the biggest mistakes you've made?
Like in my life, or just
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I'll let you take it how you want to take it. It could be. We could be talking about leadership too.
I guess mistakes. It's hard because I don't regret very much in my life. I've definitely had some very hard times.
Is there a difference between regretting something and it being a mistake, though?
I I don't know. Like, I think about mistakes as, when we make a mistake, we're growing from it. We're taking that mistake and learning from it. Regret, I feel like it's maybe something I said. I guess I'm still gonna learn from it. But maybe I wish I hadn't said it because it maybe would have changed a trajectory. So no, I do think they're kind of similar. Maybe I think of regret as a little harsher than a mistake. But I think I'm gonna go back to being an athlete. And this is maybe where I say like I don't regret anything, but I was at the peak of my career, my athletic career, when I got diagnosed with extreme arthritis in both my shoulders. And as a young athlete who didn't know about recovery, didn't know about how to take care of my body properly, at no fault of anyone's. I think it's just, the time that we were in is not the way it is today. I think that when I think about that moment, I wish that I had learned a little bit more about taking care of my body, because I think that I would possibly be in it, had taken my career further, where they were talking about the X Games and the Olympics. And, I had just made Team Canada. I was, number one in Canada and fourth, I was eighth in the world. And, I just felt I was in my early 20s at the peak of my career. I just skied in the world championships and then not being able to move my shoulders and having extreme pain, getting an MRI and them telling me that, if I ever, wanted to throw a baseball with my kids or do all of those things, I would need to quit my sport. And so I often, and it is a huge part of my story. And I think where I go now with being a wellness coach, but also a leader and a principal and a mom is, really being intentional and purposeful when it comes to taking care of yourself, your mind, your body. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it is something I often think about when it comes to maybe not a mistake, but maybe something that I would have changed in order to have a different trajectory.
How did you shift your mindset there?
Yeah. This one, was hard. And I think that no matter what you go through in life, whether it's, a massive traumatic event or whether it's a big failure, whether it's just, it's this small mistake that you make, you gotta frame your mind with the opportunity to just know that you can keep going. And for me, it took a really long time. I had identified myself as an athlete forever. I had always known that it wasn't going to be a full-time career. I'd always known that I wanted to, get married and have kids, but I didn't think it was going to end that early. And I pictured, more medals and more successes with my sport, and possibly being the first ever to, be in the X Games for that sport. So I did go into a really dark place. Like I was probably, I wouldn't label it diagnosed depression, but I was in a really dark place, and I had to force myself to see myself for somebody else, someone besides just an athlete. And so, that's when I went to school, and I, started. I always knew I wanted to be in education, but I just kind of put my focus there. And then I put my focus into exactly what I teach now through, positive statements and power statements and morning routines, and, being able to see yourself for other things outside of maybe just your job or a title as a mom or a wife, and seeing more for yourself, I think really helped me shift the way I thought, but also it allowed me to see more, which created more opportunities.
How do you take the learning from that process and apply it to the adversity you're facing now?
It's emotional. I'll tell you that, because I did learn a ton about myself, and it goes back to my grounded beliefs in, when I'm meeting adversity right now, I often just go back to, this is a moment in time and I can get through it. And what can I learn from this adversity to allow me to grow and to, in the role that I play now often is also how can I then now teach others? Because, I always do things for myself with the ability to inspire and teach others, because I, look at others for that same thing, and I like to be able to give back. And because I'm, working on myself every second of every day, I often like to be able to share, what works, what doesn't work. And yeah.
And even the best leaders, when we talk adversity talks, changing the road, and they often go hand in hand with each other. So I appreciate you sharing adversity, helping you grow, helping you go forward. And with that, we're ready to talk not so much about the adversity, but the change we're going to action on it. And so we're going to bring up our third segment here, our water element. Small shifts, big waves. In Ripples of Change, we discover how to make a lasting impact. And we're going to play another game here, Michelle. This one is not fill in the blank, it's not principle or preference, but we're actually going to get into some coaching advice, because that's what we're here for. That's why you're here as an expert. We're all leaders in some capacity. And so I'm going to ask a question, and in the shortest reply possible, I want your best advice. Okay, let's start with, what's one thing leaders should stop doing immediately?
Judgment. Stop having judgment.
What's your go-to strategy when everything feels overwhelming?
Breathing and writing things
What's
down.
a mindset shift that changed your life?
Seeing the good.
What's the best advice you'd give your younger self?
Learn these strategies earlier in life.
What's one thing people think matters, but it really doesn't?
People's perception of you.
There we go. Some quick tips. I appreciate that. We're going to get into some of those actually here. They're quite interesting to me, your responses. How are your leadership styles changing from now to what it was in your first year?
So it is a lot of what I just said too, in the quick answers, although I was quick, Tyler. I was going to elaborate on all of them, but I'm like, he said quick. I would say that I take things less personal now. And I do, when I say no judgment, I just mean that everybody that comes into education are there for kids. Like, they wouldn't have come into education. And so when you see somebody doing something that might not align with your vision, or that, might just not be, the height that you want it to be, take a step back with no judgment and look at the steps that you want to take forward. taking things personal. So when I said that, don't allow others people's perception. Is not that you don't want to learn from other people, because that's not what I mean by it. What I mean by it is that when we focus too much on what other people think of us, we lose sight of who it is that we want to be. And when you can, open yourselves up to feedback and hear it and take in what's going to help you grow, and then leave out things that don't align, that's where you're able to get to, really get to know yourself and grow yourself, and focus less on what other people think and more on how you're growing through that. So that's how I've grown too. And that's why I'm giving that back as leadership advice.
I think that's great advice. That's from you to share. I totally agree on that idea. Early on, we take things so personally, and I feel like I got a little bit ahead of the game, but I don't feel like I am my job. And I feel like a lot of people with leadership, they do. And when you feel that way, every decision, is a way to go, because it's your identity. To separate your job from your identity is a really important thing, because it lets you lead with transparency. Because we don't feel like you have to shelter and protect your personal identity. That separation, it's crucial for moving forward. And so I appreciate the story on it that you mentioned. What steps do you take after that?
So the first step is processing what it is that I need to change. So making it make sense to me. So depending whether I'm getting that feedback from another colleague, or I'm getting that feedback from, a parent, or I'm getting that feedback from my husband. I often get feedback from my husband, which is great. But I first just have to process it. And then I have to, and then I try to work through it about how is this going to make sense to me, and how am I going to use this as growth without changing who I am. Because again, it goes back to, people are going to constantly, as leaders especially, give you feedback, and sometimes it's not always great, and you then have to say, okay, I'm going to listen, because I want to be able to listen attentively. Maybe this is good feedback, and then I just now need to process it. And so I process it, I think about where it fits, and then I try to roll it out authentically. So, I'm going to give a really funny example, and it's not a leadership example, but the way that, communication is huge, but the way that I communicate sometimes with my husband, I never realized that I was often using a statement that would not acknowledge what he was saying, but just bring it back to what I wanted. And so he kept saying, like, I'm hearing you, but this is not a great way to communicate. Anyway, I had to start stopping myself and hearing myself do it. And then I had to figure out, every time we enter a conversation, I have to be very cognizant that I'm not going to do it. And then over time, now it's changed, right? So I know that's a silly example, but it's something so simple. But that's when it comes to changing in feedback, it has to make sense to you. You can't just do something because, someone tells you to do it. If it doesn't make sense to you, or you can't authentically do it, then you're not being true to yourself. And so, I really believe in that. And I try that when I'm sharing a vision for teachers as well, is that goes again back to that investment piece, right? It takes time. So you can keep giving similar feedback, and over time, you're going to start to see some of that change, because people are starting to invest in it and make sense to them.
And you kind of hit a bunch of questions there that I wanted to follow up with. You covered everything from, the best ways to implement change, how to break it down into smaller steps. And it's actually those consistent actions that represent the change process being long lasting. So with that, we're going to go away from how we actually go about change to that decision-making process. And it's going to bring us to our last element, the fire element, in our final segment. Hey, just right quick here, alchemists. If you're enjoying the show and you're listening to us on Apple, make sure you take some time to put a review on the show. And if you're on Spotify, make sure you give us a 5-star rating. When you give those ratings, it helps improve the reach of the show. My goal is impact. So I'm trying to impact as many people as I can, the lives of leaders, educators, the people trying to make a difference. And the only way that's going to happen is if we support each other by giving that review or giving that rating. Thank you so much for taking some time. Now let's get into Spark or Burn. In Spark or Burn, we either have the decisions that spark success or burn lessons into our memory. And to kick off this segment, let's make some big decisions that you have to live with. This is Final Answer, and it's a would you rather style with no explanation behind the would you rather. Ready to give it a try?
Okay.
Okay, would you rather lead without recognition or follow with full credit?
Lead without recognition.
Would you rather make bold mistakes or play it safe and miss out?
Bold mistake.
Would you rather work with someone who's honest but harsh or kind but unclear?
Honest but harsh.
Would you rather rebuild trust or start fresh with someone new?
Start fresh with someone new.
Would you rather have a full calendar or never know what's coming up?
A full calendar.
Would you rather give feedback or receive it?
Right now, I want to learn to give hard feedback. That's where I'm at.
Would you rather mentor someone difficult or be mentored by someone demanding?
Mentor someone difficult.
Would you rather succeed quietly or fail loudly?
Succeed quietly.
Would you rather lead someone that challenges you or someone that agrees with you?
No, challenges me. Yeah.
Would you rather overcome adversity alone or support someone through their adversity?
Support someone else through theirs.
Michelle, what's the hardest decision you ever had to make?
This is a hard question. Hard leadership move. I've had to have some pretty courageous conversations over the years. And some of the decisions that have to come out of those critical conversations were my hardest because I knew where my intentions were, but I don't always think that the other person on the other side knew where my intentions were coming from. And I think that's the hardest part. And without sharing, too much information about the critical conversations, but you have to have them as a leader, and you have to make tough decisions with the educators that you work alongside with and lead that don't always make sense to them. And I know for myself, my intentions are always for student success, and with at the same time trying to honor what my teachers are growing in as well. But it doesn't always turn out that way. And so I think that's the hardest decisions and things to make is through how to go about those critical conversations. And I think we could do a whole other conversation about that with leadership. But yeah, I would say through that were my hard decisions.
How do you separate emotion from logic?
So that's a really tough one. And that comes with time and work, because I think there's some people that have been in leadership most of their career and still can't do it. When we think about social emotional learning, we do need to be present with our thoughts, but we also need to be able to control our emotions when it comes to different points in leadership. And so I never want to come across cold, like I don't care, but I have to be careful not to give off my emotions to them, because it's not about me at that time. And so I really try to come across empathetic and honest and authentic without protruding my own emotion on them, because I want my intention to come across as true as it can and allow them to receive it the way that it's going to be received.
How do you make sure your values show up in your decisions?
Yeah, so that's a very tough one as a leader, because my values are the same in my leadership as in my house, and it just goes back to kindness and honesty, but also I believe really strongly in getting out of your comfort zone and growing. And so, you have to, you just really have to be able to, I'm messing up here because I'm just thinking about back to the other question, but when you first walk into a building, when you are a leader, one of the first things you have to decide is what your why is, right? Why you're doing what you're doing and what makes you the leader that you want to be, and how are you going to model and share your growth as well as pushing others. And so I think when you write that down and know what that why is and what the purpose is, and that every decision you make, no matter what's coming at you, you need to go back to that first. And one of the things I've always said is it doesn't matter what school I've been at, whether it be a teacher, as a vice principal, now as a principal, I'm the same person from every school. And I stay true to that. And you could call any colleague or any person, and I'm the same person. And so that's often advice that I give new leaders is never change who you are as a person and as a leader. You want to change and shift and grow from the learning that you get in the different buildings you go in. But when it comes to those core values of who you are, you need to stay true to those, because that's going to be the legacy that you'll leave with those teachers, without those that place. So
I'm a big fan of bringing the why into every single year. And I'm also a big fan of, the whole show is centered around the earth element and how we ground ourselves in those decisions. And it's really dependable on those values. So to cycle it back to that, Michelle, I really appreciate what you just said. Our last segment here used to be listener questions, and I'm shifting it to something a little different for the show. You're going to be the first one, which is the coolest thing, but it also makes it the shortest segment for us today. Next time I have you on, you'll get the full benefit of this. And maybe, the last episode I ever record will bring you back on for the final episode to wrap it up. What I want to do is I want my guests to leave one question for the next guest. So you have no idea who's going to be on next, what we're going to be talking about, what their level of expertise is, or where it's going. But what's one question that you'd like me to bring to the next guest on the show?
one question is, what is unique to you? What makes you stand out from others?
Perfect. I'll make sure that our next guest gets that question in its fullest, and we'll do our best to pull an answer from them. And then they will pass it on by sharing another question in the future with coming guests. And hopefully, we can maybe see this come full circle and wrap it up by bringing that final question back to you. And with that, Michelle, I just want to take some time and say thank you for connecting. Thank you for joining the show. And it meant a lot to have a great conversation. I really appreciate the value you brought to this show. And I hope that the listeners have some good and full feedback on it too.
Well, thank you, Tyler. I've loved, this is the first podcast that I've been on where we've played games. And so I'm in, have me back.
I do want to ask before we fully wrap up, how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more? Maybe they want to pursue coaching or just learn from you.
Yeah, so lots of different ways. You can get me on LinkedIn, just under Michelle Sigmann. You can get me on Instagram at Michelle Fitness Mama. You can check out my website, www.wellnessmichelle.com, and that has everything that I do in terms of my wellness business. It's got my goal setting workbook on there. It's got a little bit more about me. And the other podcast I've been on is on that website as well, so you can listen to more about my story.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of the show. If you have feedback, a suggestion, or just want to start a conversation, fire off an email to me, Tyler@elementaleducator.com. I actually read them. And if this episode sparked something, leave a review on Apple or Spotify. It helps more leaders find the show. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, where I put out additional content. I'll see you next time, same place.